Hi, thanks for tuning in today to another edition of Front Porch Conversations. Here we are on the porch at the Copeland Community Center, and it's very quiet at the moment. No crickets, no birds at the moment, but let's see what happens. And now I'd like to introduce you to our guest today, Lexie Souls. Lexie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Lexie, tell our viewers when you moved to the village and where you moved from.
Well, I moved to the village the 1st of February. And then, of course, in March, everything closed down. And luckily, my house sold also just before it closed down. So, but to get to know the village, I haven't really known it except going around in the golf cart and waving to people. And Miracle knows more people than I do.
And tell our viewers who Miracle is.
Miracle's our black lab that rides in the golf cart. She has a sister, a poodle, and she also has a kitty cat. So we're getting to know everything and everybody, but I would not have had the opportunity to know as many people without Miracle.
Well, she is a miracle in a lot of ways, but we'll talk a little more about that. Where were you living? You were living nearby, I understand.
I live down by Lauraville, which is 19 miles from here, and it's east and south. It's southeast of here. And we had 20 acres. So this is different.
It is. Were you on the river there?
No, we were not on the river. We were about a mile from the river. We were out of the flood area.
Well, you're closer to the river here than you were then.
Yes.
Well, I am so glad that you're here. I'm glad I've gotten to meet you and Miracle and Precious. And the kitty cat stayed hidden, I think, when I visited with you. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Denver and grew up in Colorado. Moved away when I was 17. I wanted to go to college, but decided that travel was more what I wanted to do. So moved to Hawaii. And then after that came back. And that started my travel log. I'd work a while, and when I got enough money, then I'd move. Ended up living in Europe for 10 months. Then came back and decided to try marriage. So that's when I got married. And we started our life in Chicago, went to St. Louis, and just kept moving after that.
Lexie, do you have brothers and sisters?
I had a brother, but he passed away, unfortunately.
What are some of your fond childhood memories?
Used to go to South Dakota up on the farm with my grandparents, and just enjoyed life. Have always had a good time with life. So, had lots of friends. Still have my original friend. We swapped roommates, and we still are friends. She still lives in Colorado, and I live here, but with the way the computer system is, we can do video chats, so we see each other a lot.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
How did you meet your husband?
We met in Colorado on a blind date, and from there, we dated for a while, then I went to Europe, and he said he wasn't going to wait around, so I said, lots of fish in the sea. So, yeah. When I came back, he said, well, if you have nothing else to do, come see me. And so I stopped in St. Louis where he was at, and from there on, we got married in Christmas of that year. So, lasted 55 years.
That was a wonderful start then.
Yeah.
Tell us, was there something special about your wedding that's a fond memory?
No, just got married.
No funny stories either?
Well, everybody had to travel to Coffeyville, Kansas, because we got married in his hometown because he needed to get back to work. So the funny story was everybody had to go to Coffeyville, Kansas, which isn't the bright spot in the U.S., but we had a
Which
good
most
time.
people said, where is that?
Yes.
I didn't even know there was a Coffeyville, Kansas.
Well, the Dalton brothers robbed a bank there. That's what it's famous for.
Well, I always say I learn something every front porch conversation. Thanks
Yeah.
for. I bet we'll learn more as we go though today.
Right.
After your marriage, where were you living then?
We moved. First, we were in Chicago. Then we went to St. Louis. From St. Louis, we went to Denver. From Denver, we went up to Milwaukee, and then we retired there.
And what was your husband's work?
He was worked for AC Nielsen Marketing Research, not the TV section.
okay.
He was in the drug and food section. And he was in the era when you reached 55, they decided that you should retire.
Mm-hmm.
So he got retired at 55, but luckily he got a big buyout. So he retired at 55 and never went back to work, except for what he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm. And at what point did you get to Florida?
We came to Florida in 1996. My mom lived here. After 47 years, she decided she couldn't stand my father, so she got a divorce. And she lived on the 20 acres, and she did not want to move because, believe it or not, they moved more than we did. So we came down, and the house was large enough. We made a mother-in-law suite, and that's how we got to Florida. Was never in our picture to be here.
Is this the warmest climate you've lived in?
Pardon?
The warmest climate you've lived in? I was thinking about the
No,
cities.
St. Louis was the worst climate we lived in.
Oh, really?
It was so humid there. And when it was winter, it's still the humidity. It just was. St. Louis is a beautiful place, but I would never go back and live there. So.
Well, after you got married, did you and your husband travel? Did you keep
Yeah.
your travel bug up?
We saw all 50 states. We sailed. We had a 30-foot sailboat. Sailed a lot in Wisconsin. Also traveled a lot. And then when we came down here, the salt water changed because we were in fresh water,
Mm-hmm.
so we couldn't bring our boat without a lot of major changes. So then we started, we went to RV. So we sailed on land instead of in water.
So some of the 50 states you saw, were they after you retired?
Quite a few of them, but when I was single, I saw a lot of states. So.
If you had to say what was your favorite state you visited or lived in, what would it be?
There's so many. Each state has something special. So I don't know that I have a favorite. And because we moved a lot and I moved a lot, I don't really can't say what even my home is,
Mm-hmm.
except where I am at the time, which sounds a little weird.
Well, I'm glad your home is in River Woods and on Live Oak Lane. Is that right?
Yes. This was an ideal place for me because I basically have no family now. And hopefully I'm going to live well and live good. Mm-hmm. So, but in case things would go awry, this is probably the best place for me to be.
And how did you come to know about the village, other than living
I
close by?
have two friends that live here, Shirley Tegro and Kathy Millinger. And they suggested that I look into it.
Well, when I hear those two names in a sentence, it makes me think of one thing, and that's the Animal Rescue Program and Shelter in Lee.
Yeah.
So that is your relationship, how
Yeah.
you met them as well.
Yeah. Met them there. Worked 3 days at the animal shelter, so We never run out of animals, unfortunately, but it keeps me busy.
And how long have you been doing that?
Since I moved down here, since 1996. So.
Wow, you're among their probably more senior volunteers as far as length of service, and probably Shirley
Correct.
as well.
They didn't start a shelter until 1996.
Oh, okay.
Before that, they just helped people get their animals spayed and neutered. They started in 1984, I believe, was their date when they organized.
For those viewers who don't know about it, let them know where it's located and kind of what the rest of your
It's located just off of 255, just past the intersection 262, which is Love's and Jimmy's, is at that section. And we bought an old greyhound farm. And it's owned by the organization, it's a corporation. And we can house 75 animals. We have cats, dogs, kittens, and puppies.
Do you ever have horses or any other?
No.
It would be smaller animals.
Yes. We have the property that someday maybe somebody will expand into it, but that's a whole different ballgame.
I'm sure it is.
So,
well, now tell us about Miracle.
Miracle is a black lab that was thrown over the fence at the shelter with 11 puppies. Someone had worked with her because she knew how to sit and she knew how to come to some commands. And at the time, I had 2 big dogs, but everybody said, "Well, you need a third." So finally, I took her home, and she gained. She was the 7th dog, and we had 4 cats, and she fit in just fine. And then when I decided to move here, luckily I only had Miracle and Precious and Hobo, or I probably wouldn't have been allowed to come in. And there was a discussion because they said in the rules of Dowling Park, it says no animal over 62. Well, she weighs over 62 pounds. But they said as long as she's well behaved, she could come. So she had to learn to walk on a lead, but she loves people. So,
well, I can attest to that. It's fun being around her.
Yeah.
And how long has she been a part of your family?
She's been part of the family for 6 years.
And what about Precious?
Precious been part of the family for 10 years. She's 12, so she just rides on the golf cart and plays in the yard. That's her expansion of the world. So
you were saying earlier that you thought Miracle was interested in getting a deer.
Yes, Miracle has given up squirrels and gone for deer. And
what's her closest encounter?
I don't know who's going to win out, but there's some days, boy, she pulls me really good when she sees the deer. And they seem to like her. The other day, I thought the deer was going to come up and give her a kiss. And I finally go, no, I don't want you to do that. So, but she's gone for deer now. So,
well, we better put out a notice to the deer, huh?
Yes, there are certainly a lot of them here. So,
and I've noticed just in driving outside the village, and it seems like a lot more are out in the daytime. I don't know if they're searching for water or what.
Well, in our previous stay down where we were, we hit 3 deer. So there are more deer outside the village, but they feel better protected here, I think.
I'm sure. That reminds me of a friend whose father used to say that he had hunted all his life and never gotten a deer until he hit one.
Yeah.
And he wished he had not gotten that one. It did a lot of damage to his vehicle. So it's something really to be cautious of.
Our one pickup they did, it was a big buck, and it did $8,000 worth of damage. So, yeah. But someone got the rack, so someone had a story.
I bet. Tell us a little bit more about your experiences with the shelter and what you do.
experiences is there's at times you just don't like people because what they do to animals or how they treat them. We get a lot of nice animals, but when they get in their teen years, people say, I'm not going to put up with it. And to me, an animal is a lifetime commitment. Mm-hmm. And so at times you have a hard time understanding. I do understand, like a lot of older people, when they have to move, they move from a larger place to a smaller place, or they have to go into a nursing facility. So there's those types of things. But people should talk it over when they get an animal, especially if they're of an older age. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle it? In my particular case, if something happens to me, all my animals go to heaven with me. Hopefully that's where I'm headed. Mm-hmm. And you should think about the future, because my animals wouldn't know how to live with someone else, because they're used to what I do, how we do. So it's just not easy. But it's nice to see so many older people here have animals to keep them company, especially during this trying time.
Mm-hmm. Well, with your comment about your animals would go to heaven when something happens to you, the first time somebody said that to me, I thought, oh, how cruel. But the older I've gotten and the more world experience I have, and have lived with the same cat for 16 years, I can't imagine her living somewhere else or having to make an adjustment.
No, they're used to what you do, what you require, and that's their life. And especially if they've lived with you a long time. When we moved here, that was a big move, and I sat and talked to the animals and said, okay, it's a big change, but we'll find our new beginnings there. And the cat adjusted fast, because she has a screen porch and a cat door, which she didn't have at the old place. But the two dogs had a little bit of a problem because the noise level was different, and people were always around, and they didn't see people that often. So they had about a 2-month adjustment. So you can imagine if I had been removed from the picture, what would have occurred. So people really need to think about that. So.
But as you said, they are great blessings for people in their lives.
Yes, I have a lot of conversations with them. And they answer the way I want. So.
I can't always say that my cat doesn't wake me up at the right time. Sometimes she thinks we should get up earlier than I do. And so we have a discussion of that. She usually wins.
Yeah, they sort of run the house.
Yep.
They tell you what they want. People who think animals don't talk, they do.
We were talking earlier, and we were talking about what's happened during the pandemic or the quarantine, particularly with the shelter. You want to talk about that a little bit? You had to close for a while to the public, I understand.
Yes, we have thrift stores on the property, which is an income for the shelter, because we aren't funded by any government agency. So that was a big hit to us. We did keep the shelter open, but we stopped taking in animals because, of course, we didn't know where they were coming from and what their stories were, which was a hurt for the animals. Where our thrift stores are open, but we have strict regulation that people had to wear masks, and only 4 people at a time can be in the buildings. So I think we're all going to have to learn to live with the new norm, but I personally believe we need to start working on it. So that's my personal opinion.
And you said that a number of people have adopted pets during this time as well. Is that right?
Yes. Actually, they have adopted, the adoptions have been better, but I think that's because people are home. And they found a vacancy in their home. So hopefully, whatever the new norm is, they still want that animal. That's the scary part. Will they still want it? So one doesn't know, but I think we had to start finding whatever our new lives are going to be.
And I know you've been going to the shelter, but what else have you done during the pandemic quarantine?
Gone to Publix. Not a whole lot. I really wanted to travel. I have a lot of friends all over, but it's so hard to know, especially I have no fear of traveling by myself or with my animals, but when the protests start, that was scary because being by myself and going through big cities, I go, I don't know what's going on. So I've cut back, but I'm hoping next year can get into more travel and going seeing people. I hope we have it ironed out a little better.
I hope so too. During your in the past, have you worked outside the home?
Yes.
What kind of work did you do?
Oh, all kinds of work. I retired as at a factory in Wisconsin. I was second in command. Never dreamt in my world that that would be what I do, but there's a lot of factories up in Wisconsin, so it was the norm for me. But did lots of stuff because moving around, I had to find new jobs. My husband, of course, was lucky and kept his job. So.
And what kind of factory was it?
It was a hydraulics factory. We made hydraulics for these, a machine, that big crane that's on the bridge. We made hydraulics for like that. And boat lifts, hospital beds, all kinds of, if it needed pumped up in the air, we probably made it. So.
What are the things that you have learned through travel that you think others should know?
I'm sorry?
What are the things you've learned by all your travels that you think other people should know?
That you just learn to like whatever you see. There's good in everything. And you can find bad anywhere you go, but you try to look for the good and find good stuff instead of bad stuff. And always feel good about what you're doing.
When you were in Europe as a young person, or much younger at least, how many countries did you visit?
Visited all of Europe except for the communist countries. When we had a visa to go into Russia, but the U.S. Council said at that time Russia was a little eerie, so they said if you get stuck over there, we can't guarantee how soon we'll get you out. So my friend and I stood and talked and said, think we'll bypass. So
one of the things that a number of people have said when we've had conversations is they think travel has been the big part of their education, and it sounds like that's something you would agree to.
Travel, I feel badly about, I think that history is so interesting in person, and I feel badly that we destroyed some of our history, and I think down the road people will wonder why we did that, because to me it proved nothing, but in person it's good.
And it widens your horizons.
Yes.
It's just like in reading, I like to read. I like to read historical fiction, and I've read a few books during the pandemic that were not necessarily historical fiction, but the author would find some piece of history that is not well known, and has based the whole story around that. And it just makes me want to learn more about that era.
Right. Yes, and I think books are neat. I still like the old style reading. Mm-hmm. Machines are wonderful, but some of the old style stuff is just as good. And I hope we don't always lose it.
I don't either. I've done my part in keeping enough books around. Luckily, I have gotten rid of some to the library, but and I'm reading more on Kindle, which is just convenient at times because some books are so heavy anymore to hold.
Right, and it's easier to travel with it.
Right, exactly.
Yes. I went to Kindle also, so I can't say I've stuck all the way to books,
but sometimes it's just nothing like holding that book and reading the paper.
Right. Yeah.
What advice would you give a young person today?
That's a difficult question. I don't always correspond with young people because they don't seem inquisitive about things around them. Mm-hmm. They seem more interested in their phones or their machines instead of finding out what a person is all about. So I think that they should put their phones and their computers away and just try to learn from everybody and look at life in a different aspect. But that's the old time of me coming out.
Well, I am hopeful that our Front Porch Conversations provide a heritage of information that people can refer to. And gosh, that's what she thought, or that's what he experienced. And I wish I had known him, or that was my grandfather and I didn't know that about him.
Right,
So.
And I think that there's so many interesting people here that have been so many different places and done so many different things that young people, if they just spent a day here, probably could learn things that they never realized was possible.
Mm-hmm. And has there been a life-changing experience you'd like to share?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
Well, it's been a lovely experience being on the porch with you this morning. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.
And I actually think I've just heard a few birds, so now our conversation is complete. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to seeing you on another show coming up.